into the show. It is Daniel Workman coming to you live from the Dream Imagination Sports Studios. It is 9 a.m. on the East Coast. This is your 6 a.m. super early morning wake-up call out west and all time zones in between and around the world. Thanks for tuning in on this Wednesday morning. Earlier this week, we were able to catch up with Eric Winalda, and we are going to bring you part one of that interview today. And then part two we will air tomorrow during the show. And we talked a wide range of topics concerning American soccer and the landscape and some of the different byproducts and effects of our current ecosystem, and really talked through some specific examples of those byproducts and effects, and I think it'll be a really good conversation. And as always, he and I have a lot of fun when we chat. So, look forward to bringing that to you today, and then part two tomorrow, and that's coming up right after the break. I wanted to start off the show today, really getting into, an issue that I don't think is really being discussed enough. And that issue is this: who should get stuck with the bill? Right now, no one is operating, or if they are operating, they're operating at full capacity. The entire global economy has slowed down tremendously. There are a lot of people in America without jobs, as the economy was essentially just frozen, put on hold. And in that hold, the longer it lasts, the more jobs we lose, because someone is going to have to make a decision. And those decisions, that someone is usually a manager or a business owner, or, sometimes it's an employee, but there's often a bill that has to be paid. Rent is due, payroll is due, and you can only go so long operating that way before you have to make some really tough decisions. And this goes back to the fact that, we're just in a landscape right now of uncertainty, of when we can get out of this, combined with the fact that there isn't really operations taking place right now. These leagues are not operating. They essentially been shut down, many of which, or several of which, have announced, cancellations. So all of the leagues that play this Cape Cod style short summer league, season, have all pretty much come out and said we're canceled for 2020, that it's over. Some have said, look, we're going to entertain the idea of, trying to do some type of season in the fall. But for sure, we're done in the summer of 2020. Others have said, look, we're just putting everything on hold until 2021, no matter what. Like, we're just going to wait. We're done this year, and that's it. We're going home. And so when we look at this, it's like a game of financial hot potato. Who's going to get stuck with the bill? We talk about pay-to-play soccer and the effects of pay-to-play soccer on the country, and there are major impacts at the youth level. Participation, opportunity, access, all of those things are major issues. However, one of the things that is not really discussed a lot when we talk about pay to play is that U.S. soccer has made this an adult problem as well. And our leagues at the adult level are pay to play. And the fees, if they're not paid, then the league's stuck holding the bill. And if they are paid, then the clubs get stuck holding the bill. And if the clubs pay them, then where does their money come from? Oftentimes it's from the participating players or families who pay to play in that club, and therefore they get stuck holding the bill. So somebody's going to get stuck holding the bill. And in these scenarios, the league, the federation, which filed, for economic relief from the U.S. government, the leagues who could file for economic relief from the government, the clubs who could try to file for economic relief from the government, the families, some of which could file for economic relief from the government. Somebody's going to get stuck holding the bill. And in some cases, it may be multiple that are getting stuck holding the bill. I'm bringing this up because we've gotten information that there are a couple leagues that are basically taking 50 to 60% of the dues that were paid for 2020, and they are not refunding those fees. They are keeping them. They are not refunding them and giving them back to the clubs. Therefore, what are the clubs supposed to do? What are the clubs supposed to do in this situation? Can they fight it? Is there a cause or a pathway for recourse? What if they want to demand their refund? If a league doesn't operate, why is that the club's fault? If the league cancels, why is that the club's fault? Why are the fees being paid and kept? Why are they not returned and refunded? Somebody is going to be left in the lurch. And there's an argument to be made like, look, okay, we're not going to operate. We're going to shut down. Here's our operating budget. If we're not having matches, we're not having to do certain things. So here's our salary commitments, etc. So we need to keep X amount of dollars and to cover those commitments, and then disperse the rest. And clubs can choose. If a club has a choice to vote on that, okay, so you're willing to hold at least part of the bag. You're going to eat a loss to keep the league funded and running. Okay, that's your decision. You do with it how you want to. If a league's not operating and the league is not providing you any value, is it a 50 to 60% commitment? Is that money just gone that you're never getting back? That's some of the realities that these teams are facing, especially these adult amateur teams that are looking at canceled leagues, and they're getting offers of a small credit towards the future, or in some cases not seeing money that was paid this year ever again. Have they had the ability to determine their own fate? Have they had the ability to really make the decision for themselves? Well, every league's different. Why? Because some leagues are member-controlled leagues. Some leagues are owned by an individual or a small group of individuals. Some leagues are a hybrid of the two. So some leagues have third-party ownership, meaning there's not a club owner that owns a portion of the league, and generally a significant portion of the league, and then the clubs may own the other part of the league or other portion of the league. This is actually Major League Soccer for a long time. They had outside investment in the league, and as of now, from what I've been told, that is no longer the case. That the league is wholly owned by its investor operators 100%. But in the past, they had a third-party ownership that owned, a significant chunk of the league. Wasn't necessarily a majority, but was a good percentage. And so that is another ownership structure of a league. So you could have the clubs owning or being a member, like a nonprofit member type of league, and the NPSL is an example of that. You have a wholly owned league like the WPSL, where a few individuals own it, and then you have, the MLS example, where they had teams that owned portions of the league, and then they had outside investment that owned parts of the league. And so when you're looking at all of these different scenarios, you have to also look at like what's going on here and what kind of expenses is a league in their pitch to their members, their member clubs, their member teams. What are they trying to do? What are they trying to cover? So if I am a member controlled league, and we meet and we say, hey, look, we've got ongoing commitments here. Or can we, each of our clubs, can we, give ourselves basically a partial refund, but keep the league operations intact, and we're just going to, not maybe make some investments in some things we were going to do to grow the future. Maybe we, maybe we don't, have the travel expenses and some other things. So that's off the table, and we will pay our salary commitments and our other operating commitments. Maybe that's, like a rent or lease or, a bank note or something like that. And in the rest, we're going to just, because we're not operating, we're going to refund those monies. So maybe that's a choice that you make as a club in a member controlled league. If you're in a league that's completely owned by third party owners, meaning the clubs don't have a say, you're paying a fee to get into the league, you're at the mercy of these people. And, when you start adding that up and you look at those fees and you start, doing the math, who's getting stuck here holding the bag? We've seen in some of those cases that it's clubs that are getting stuck holding the bag, which eventually, where does their money come from? Well, now we've got to look at other places where that money comes from. So that money is probably coming from sponsors. It's coming from, members. It's coming from players many times. So who's getting stuck holding the bag? Well, in this case, we're talking about the players, clubs, communities are getting stuck holding the bag, and the league is not. So one of the things that I would look at in these kind of scenarios is I think the leagues should be trying to get financial assistance from the government in these programs, these kind of PPP type of programs, to cover their payroll and their rent. And that's what those programs were designed to do while we're in this downturn. And then I would try to find ways to mitigate the cost for the clubs and allow the clubs to then be able to get some of those monies back to help them be around for next year. But this is part of our issues at hand, is that our system is so predicated on having pay to play as part of how we do soccer in this country, that the money has to flow up, not back down. Meaning we don't have massive pools of revenue, television revenue, commercial revenue, player transfer market revenue that is flowing down the pyramid of leagues and bringing money into these clubs. Instead, the clubs are then having to pay that money up into the leagues to either get access to a higher league or to fund the league they're playing in. And in that situation, what is the best course of action? And you can make arguments on both sides. Look, we need to try to keep our operations so that we don't have to start over. And so can everybody chip in and do that, etc.? Okay. That's an argument that makes sense to me. There's another argument that says, hey, look, keep the clubs healthy and we'll figure out the organization once we come out of this. But we got to have the clubs. Without the clubs, we don't have anything anyway. When I'm looking at it, I think you got to find a balance in the two. If you're wanting to keep a league that you're in running, then I think there is some deference that you have to give to them, like how we got to pay, we've got to do something to kind of keep that part afloat. But I think you should have a lot of scrutiny in that. You should be really looking into that, really deciding what it is that you're willing to pay for. Could you and should you in some cases demand a reduction of salaries and compensation? I think so. I think Will Wilson, right away did that with U.S. Soccer. He said, look, I'm going to, while we're in this situation, I'm going to take a pay cut of 50% right off the top, So I think that even if it's, a 10%, 20%, 30% reduction, maybe the salary is not high enough that you can take a massive cut, but you could show a sign, give a signal to these clubs. Look, I feel your pain. I am also going to take, a deferred salary or a pay cut, temporary pay cut during this season, whatever, because to me, it's better when everyone shares the burden. When the league shares the burden, federation shares the burden, the club shares the burden, the players, the fans, the community share the burden. When everybody is sharing the burden, we're better off. And the reason why is it creates a sense of community and camaraderie. We're all having to take a hit here. You create and sow seeds of discord whenever you create a scenario when some people get to live like kings and others have to give up everything. That's not a fair trade. That's not a balanced and equitable relationship. So if a league is saying, hey, we need to keep funds to keep operating, and the clubs are going, but you're stiffing us of all of our money, if you're the league, you got to give an olive branch. You got to say, look, all right, we're cutting this, and this. And so therefore, that's going to reduce the financial burden on the clubs. We're taking a hit. You guys are obviously also taking a hit, but we're all in this together. We will see better days. I think that's an acceptable reality. A shared burden in this season is the right way to go. And, in the absence of that, you create these issues of discord, etc. So, I hope those things change. And one of the things that I think is really needs to be on the chopping block is this idea of these sports organizations trying to get all this money for this giant pay-to-play infrastructure, estimate it at like $15 billion a year, and that's primarily out of the youth space. And they keep lobbying Congress, trying to get money for themselves. This youth sports industry estimated to be worth $15 billion annually, and league apps suggest that the registration fees may be down as much as 90% with no games. I think this is a time where a giant rethink is in order, and I'll definitely get into more of that either later in the show or tomorrow. Before we get to this part one of the interview with Eric Winalda, I first want to tell you about Ductic Brand, DUKTIG brand.com. They are a company that would be very cool to support in a time like this. They are a small business. They're an innovative business. They're a creative business that are doing some really cool things in the soccer space, and you should check them out at ducticbrand.com. Place an order. When you do, use promo code DWShow. You'll get 10% off of that order at ducticbrand.com today. We'll be right back with part one of our interview with Eric Winalda. Welcome back into the show. Eric Winalda joining us, friend of the show, friend of mine. How are you today?
I am surviving. The weather is terrific outside in Vegas, but I've only been able to venture outside for about 30 seconds. So that's all I got for you. But it's, the Winalda family's hanging in tight.
Hanging in tight. Well, that's good to hear. A lot of stuff in the news, sporting news, especially concerning American soccer. And one of the things I wanted to first kind of just jump right into is this recent announcement with the U.S. women's national team case. U.S. soccer kind of winning round one is the way I'm looking at it. It seems to be more of a boxing match, round by round kind of legal fight at this point. The women's national team coming out immediately saying, "Look, we're going to round two. We're going to appeal. We're going to keep pushing this." Envelope and pushing this whole thing forward. Without, you've talked about this publicly. I've talked about it on the show about, the support that is needed from this federation in regards to honoring our women's national team and treating them with dignity and respect and honor. And I don't think we have to go down that road at this point. I think you're on record with how you feel about the women's national team, as am I. One of the things I do want to bring up is kind of a look back to how we got here over the last few years. There was a lot of talk going into the presidential election in which you were running in 2018 about, how we handle our women's programs, our women's national team. And you were very vocal at the time about not just support for the women's national team, but I think something that wasn't talked about enough was your idea of really wrapping our arms around, from a federation point of view, the whole of women's soccer, the NWSL, the whole, fact of leagues that come up under the NWSL and support, like just building and really supporting the entire women's soccer movement. As we kind of look over these last couple of years and see where we are right now, how do you think things would have been different had you been successful in 2018 and winning the presidential election compared to the aftermath that we see right now?
Well, I mean, one of the things, first of all, it's great to see you, buddy. I miss our conversations immensely because we got to spend so much time together. But let's face it, if we're going backwards here, how much time did we spend talking about this very subject? Almost, I would say 60, 70%. And the question is, if you're asking me how would things be different, is that we would have had a federation that would have been proactive, not reactive. And what that means is there has never been a recognition from the federation standpoint outside of, hey, here's your medal and how can we capitalize on this, as opposed to really rewarding our women for the successes that they've had and embracing that and actually having this relationship that's not fragmented. That is, we're in this together. I've had that issue with the men's national team for decades, that we as a national team felt like we were our own little group, and we were not only battling against whoever we were playing against that day, but also our own federation, who was simply trying to manipulate our path, our income streams, everything. So the women's national team would have been something that would have gotten a complete, it would have been an opportunity to just break down all those barriers, cut all that red tape, and just start over. And just start a conversation of, hey guys, how do we get to a point where you guys can feel that we are a team here? And that conversation needed to come from the federation first. It's not a sit back, treat them poorly, and wait till they react and wait till they look like the ones that are reacting, when all they're doing is saying, hey, look what we've done. Why can't we have a little bit a bigger piece of this pie? I think we've earned it. And for us, I think if you and I would have been involved, it would have been, hey, let's sit at the table and let's figure this out. Let's figure out where those revenue streams are coming from. We are dealing with brands when we're dealing with our women's national team. These women are their own brand, and there are so many ways to find synergy there where everyone benefits. And as long as it's going to be this fight, all that 150 million that they were talking about is going to keep depleting and depleting and depleting until it's down to a nub, because we're spending more money paying lawyers to argue about things than we are paying our women for their successes. So that would have been number one. I think we would have been proactive to go to the table and say, all right, let's go. Come on, let's figure this out. I want you happy. I want you to feel the pride that you're supposed to feel when you put on that shirt, not wear it backwards or up there, or inside out, and have to make a statement or all that stuff that goes along with the platform that they have, that they didn't abuse it. They were simply that I don't want to use that analogy, but when you mistreat someone that long, they eventually start to fight back, and it should have never gotten to this.
Where do you think the culture of antagonism has come from in terms of this relationship or attitude towards the national team and the players?
It was short. Sunil Gulati. Sunil Gulati is a take it or leave it guy. And there's a lot of people that didn't want to engage in those conversations. And for a long time, he ruled the federation with, well, don't make that guy get that guy upset because your career's over. And it was all based on fear. So that's the answer to that question. That culture comes directly from Sunil Gulati, whether he wants to admit that or not. He has had an enormous impact on the sport. And for those of us who have been around long enough, we can appreciate the good in some of that. Although that we're at a point now where the voting structure doesn't make sense, and it's all structured to keep power in the hands of power, and it doesn't give the other leagues or the other organizations enough voting power to have a voice. But look, it's a take it or leave it deal. That take it or leave it is something that every player that was a part of the national team and or Major League Soccer had heard at one point through their agent or directly from Sunil. And that culture of, this is what we're willing to do, and we're not going to bend, and this is my negotiating tactic, here we go. And I want this over as quickly as possible. And if you fight me, we'll sue you. So that's the culture that was created. Flynn was very much a part of moving the paperwork around, but for the most part, that's just the federation's relationship with the entities that they did business with.
And in terms of the players, take us behind the crest for a moment. Take us inside the locker room. You don't have to go into, names or anything like that, but just give us some examples of what those conversations were like from a player perspective, having to deal with a federation that, publicly might act like, oh, we're rooting for our players, but behind the scenes, as you have pointed out, wasn't necessarily always the best of relationships. So what were some of those types of conversations like behind the scenes in the locker room?
I was told 3 times privately and personally that you'll never play for the United States national team again. I was told that when I had 15 caps. I was told that when I had 60 caps, and I was told that when I had 80, and I ended up with 106. So the conversations that occurred and the tactics that the federation employed was divide and conquer. It was scare the younger players into basically going with the narrative that was coming out of Chicago. So if you go back to Alan Rothenberg, for example, these words came out of his mouth. We don't care. We'll put the Olympic team on standby. We'll put them on an airplane and fly them into wherever you are, and they'll represent us. We don't care about your plight. So it's very similar, or not too dissimilar, from what the women are going through now. But to the credit of the group in 1995 in the Copa America, it wasn't a locker room. It was a small little hotel room in Paysandú, with back then a box about the size of just an intercom, where we put every single player in a room, and we had conversations with the federation about how we felt we were being mistreated, and we were in a lockout, and we went on strike. And at the end of the day, we played games. It didn't affect us in the sense we actually did very well in that Copa America. We went to the Final Four, actually. We lost to Colombia, but we were in a spot where we did very well in that competition, beating Argentina, beating Chile, beating Mexico. We lost to Bolivia and lost to Brazil, but we had a great tournament. But Greg Berhalter was in that room. Tab Ramos was in that room. These are people that have relationships with the federation now. So some of those relationships have been, repaired. But other conversations and words that were spoken at times in heated negotiations caused relationships to be frayed. And those friendships, which, whether they were rather really friendships, were now adversaries. So we had to fight. We had to fight for what we felt was right. And for the generations that came after us as players, it was scary because, if you're not together, if you're not, everybody on the same page, and you don't have, the trust that, hey, you know what, we've got this, and no one's going to step out of line. But what would happen is, we would have to spend a lot of our time with the younger players saying, I know they're trying to scare you. I know they told you you're never going to have a career, and and this is really going to affect you, but relax. You're doing this for the better, or the bigger good. But that's hard. It's hard to tell a young 22, 23-year-old player, you got to go with the team, and this is what the team thinks. And those guys were scared out of their minds. And those tactics, they exist in business. They exist in every business, but unfortunately, they've had a dramatic effect on our federation and the relationship with the players over the last couple of decades.
Speaking of divide and conquer, you brought that phrase up, and I think that is also applicable to the conversation of our ecosystem. Is very much a separated ecosystem. You've got MLS operating in their space and NWSL operating in their space. You've got USL trying to operate in their space with 3 different leagues and the talk of a women's league and then this academy project. And then you've got every other kind of, alphabet soup of leagues and associations, et cetera. But no one is linked together in the way that a federation, in my view, and in your view, should be linked together. How from a negative impact standpoint, how hurtful is that to our American soccer landscape, this divide and conquer mentality on these leagues, like a USL, for example, or the NWSL, that are trying to, make their way, find their space, build, their leagues and their clubs and their operations. But because of this, inordinate amount of voting power concentrated in the hands of those who have power, and we're talking about, Major League Soccer and Don Garber, who has a very big presence on the board of directors and in that professional landscape. How detrimental is that to our American soccer ecosystem, this divide and conquer mentality?
Well, I mean, okay, have you ever seen the movie American President?
Yeah.
It's a pretty good movie. It's more of a love story. It's with Michael Douglas, and I always forget her name, but I think she's married to Beatty, Warren Beatty. But
yeah, I know you're talking about. Ironically, I watched that recently. It was on Stars or something. I don't know.
It's a great movie, and because there's a lot of lessons within, and it's pure politics. It's the gun bill versus the fossil fuel bill, and what it is these different interest groups come into a room and say, well, unless you do this for me, I'm not giving you my vote. And the politics of trying to figure out getting everybody on the same page, when you have a youth organization saying, well, if you don't do this, then we won't do that, and then we don't feel we have your support, then we're going to do something that's counterproductive to the game, but it does fit within our agenda. So, whether that's the ECNL or the DA or the USYSA, or everybody's fighting with each other over a market to try and increase their piece of the pie. So that's an ongoing struggle. And is everybody really seeing the bigger picture? Is everybody asking the one question that should mean more than anything? Does my actions or does my organization make the United States a better soccer nation? That's the one question that every organization within the United States Soccer Federation's umbrella should be asking themselves every day. Not how much can we make out of this tournament, or how are we going to spread the money around so people can't figure out what we're doing or what we're up to, or how do we reward people within our organization as opposed to putting the money or reinvesting the money back into a system that is for the betterment of the players. It's human nature. There's so many parts to this, and there's so many people involved that everybody has a different way of looking at this thing. But and I said this, the last thing I said on the stage when we eventually threw the white towel and said we were out of this thing, was that until we learn to get along and stop fighting with each other, and understand common goals and have a real direction as a soccer nation, then we probably are going to stay in this state of stagnation. which is really unfortunate, because I think it's clear that we have more potential than anybody, and more resources than anybody. What the Germans have done, and they really should be commended here for their ability to throw egos out the window, and for their ability to understand that each club and each organization is there for the betterment of the sport. There's a reason why a small little country like that can be world champions. There's a reason. And it's not because they're smaller than us and it's easier to manage. It's that they're all rowing in the right direction. And if somebody starts rowing in the wrong direction, they just pick that guy up and throw him out of the boat. And that's not what we do. We try to figure out a way, in a very slow, methodical, how do we get this guy to change the way he's rowing? And maybe if we do this, or maybe if we do that. Now, 6 months later, the guy's still, now the guy's got the rows up and say, well, I'm not rowing, I'm not doing anything until somebody does something.
Or maybe we give him his own boat, right?
Yeah, get in your own boat, float away.
Right.
Those are not options either. So, what we have is a system that is recognizable to the people within it. Change, as much as what we realized through that entire presidential run, was everybody was screaming about change and everybody was lying about it. And that's a hard thing to recognize, and it's a hard thing to conquer. Because at the end of the day, what we realized is nobody really wanted change. And nobody really cared about the ultimate objective of us being a better soccer nation. They cared about their organization, their small little piece of this huge puzzle that they wanted to protect, because that was their job. We're seeing it right now. We're seeing a bunch of governors and mayors argue with the president about what's right. And do we open up our state? And do we shut it down? Who's going to make that decision? Is the federal government going to make that decision? Is the governor going to make the decision, or is each mayor in each one of these cities going to have a say on that? This is the epitome of politics. This is how hard it is to get to an objective when everybody has a different path to getting there. So scary. It's scary, and what we're going through, and what we're enduring as a nation right now. And I don't know how you guys have handled it. I've been in quarantine since March 12th. So that's what they told me to do. That's what the government said. I didn't take it upon myself to say, well, I don't think I don't think that's the appropriate action. I follow the law. So
right.
That's just me, a law-abiding citizen, pay my taxes. That's what I do. I mean, that's what we have in the soccer community is people, out there, I don't think I need to wear a mask. Well, I'm not going to wear one. I'm going to have a flag and a sign that says, I disagree. So that's the difficulty of real politics.
Yeah. Annette Bening is the actress that we forgot. I looked that up while you were talking.
Fox is in that deal. Martin Sheen is in that.
Yeah.
Great lines. And the greatest line in that is, we have had presidents who were beloved who couldn't put a coherent sentence together with a flashlight or something like that. So, and they would walk, but the question was, in the absence of real leadership, people will listen to anyone who steps up to the mic. They're so thirsty for leadership, they will crawl across the desert. And when they get to the mirage, they will drink the sand. They are so thirsty for leadership. And the president says, Lewis, they're not, they don't drink the sand because they're searching for something. They drink the sand because they don't know the difference. And there's some truth. I'm botching that thing up, but go watch it yourself.
No, I got it. Yeah.
And it really is telling, because at the end of it all, the American president, Michael Douglas's character, gets beat up the whole movie because he has a relationship with a girlfriend. And the entire movie becomes about a character debate. And I feel like you and I went through that. My divorce got dragged through in the New York Times. We had people attacking me, telling my business acumen, to the fact that I had to do what was right for my family. and I made decisions 6, 7, 8 years ago. And then there was this idea that there's no way that I'm qualified to run for president. So I get it. I watch that movie and I go, oh, that's, if you want to be in the public eye, be ready, because they're coming.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you can identify too much
Yeah.
with what Michael Douglas' character would do.
Presidential election, house burns down, car gets stolen. I was just glad to get out of 18. That was my objective there.
Yeah, it was brutal. I was watching. Emily and I were watching the new Apple TV series called Home, and it like kind of chronicles these different really cool architecture homes around the world in each episode. So there's this one lady that was born in Canada but like raised in Bali, and she makes these ginormous, amazing houses out of bamboo. Like the whole thing is bamboo.
Oh, wow.
It's incredible. But one of the recent episodes we watched was Malibu, and they get to a point of the episode on the fire in 2018, and I was talking to Emily about it. I was like, dang, that was when Eric's house burned down and all this stuff. So it was we were.
My house burned down on the Channel 5 News.
I know you woke me up with that text message going. You didn't send a message or anything other than the video. And I just was like, wait, that looks like Eric's house. Is that your house? Yep.
I was in the car at 4:30 in the morning, with my golf clubs, my expensive tequila, which was and the decanters, the expensive stuff, which is still behind me, by the way. And all my expensive suits and expensive shoes. So there's my priorities. That's all I got out of there with. And the irony of that was, and which was really horrible, is I had the 1969 cards, the Topps cards, baseball cards that were given to me on my birthday. So I had the full set. The full set was worth, I don't know, $50,000. And I managed to get that out of the house, right?
Oh, you got it out of the house?
I got it out of the house, but I didn't get out of my car when my car was stolen 8 days later. So you talk about having your all-time bad years. I don't know, it was 200 jerseys or something.
Now, are we sure that your car was stolen? Because you had called earlier and thought that your car was stolen.
My car getting stolen to give everybody on the show a recap there. We were so strung out, traveling all over.
You were coming back from Dubai.
Right. And I parked my car at some god awful spot that I remembered. It was E something, whatever. And so when I got to the spot, which I remembered where I parked my car, all there was broken glass and no car. And I called you. I said, "You're never going to believe it. My car's stolen." And then you said, "Are you sure you're in the right terminal?" And I realized that I was in my state. I was so tired. I was coming back from Dubai that I was parked in Terminal 6 or the 6 when the car was actually in 5, and I went to 6.
The funny thing was you had convinced yourself because you had seen like broken glass near the parking spot or something.
Somebody else's car got stolen in that spot, but it wasn't mine. And it was just, oh God. I mean, there's so many little stories within we should write a book or just do more of these shows.
I'm telling you, those were great times. That was you weren't happy about it, but Amanda and I had a nice laugh at your expense over the stolen car.
Those out there who have ever experimented with apple cider vinegar.
Oh, those were that was I wish I had that on video. I mean, that was
you don't wish you had that on video.
That was hilarious. Just some of our fun times during that election season. Getting back to the conversation at hand. Clubs in this country, clubs like that, yours in the USL, there in Vegas. they're at an extreme disadvantage compared to clubs around the world for a few reasons. And a lot of that goes back to finances. So around the world, these clubs that are in, open systems, that has opened up additional revenue streams that has allowed those clubs and leagues. Are they taking a financial hit right now? Absolutely. No one in soccer around the world is escaping some financial hit, but not having all of your financial revenue in one basket, i.e., match day tickets, cars, etc., and having television revenues, having commercial and sponsorship, having the solidarity payment, training compensation, the player market of the selling and buying of players, all of these aspects.
Which is the one piece that last piece, which a lot of the for whatever reason, a lot of the coaches, general managers, and ownership groups are not engaging in. We've had this debate. Have we ever really engaged in the real, true soccer business, or the business of soccer? Have we ever done that? I would argue no. And I would go back to maybe a good example of this, and this is probably why I was so optimistic, is my first managerial position at the professional level was the Atlanta Silverbacks. And I came into that job sideways, meaning I was still working for Fox. So I was trying to manage both, which was really, really difficult. But because of the structure of the NASL and the fact that they played a spring and a winter season, or spring and fall, I should say, and there was that ability, that window in between, I was able to sell 19 players in the course of 13 months. I was able to move players on and make money for my ownership group. I'm not trying to brag here, but I may have been the first one to balance the books on players exiting. But we were paying these guys a lot, but we were able to move a player like Chris Clutie, for example, who went to the Colorado Rapids and then eventually to Portland and Columbus. But the way that we structured the deal, it wasn't a lot of money. It was $80,000 and some bonuses if he were to play 20 games. But that money meant a lot to my budget. It meant a lot to my owner that we were able to. So he wasn't paying for the next crop of players. A player that played for us was essentially paying for it. Poku was another great example. We had him on the second sale. So the club made money off of him. I mean, when we moved, Joe Nasco, our goalkeeper, to Colorado again, it's the same story. Smaller deals too, to teams like San Antonio, weren't a lot of money, but they recompensated my ownership group for his expenses. Now, the good news in that is we were able to do it, and I was able to move players out and reinvest because we had the windows available. They're not available with USL. They're not available with Major League Soccer, so it makes it problematic. You have coaches who, Taylor Twellman was a great example of this. The kid was doing great. And there was an offer, I can't remember the team, it might have been Blackburn. I know it was in the EPL. And it was substantial. It was a $3 million transfer. And it was the middle of the season because that's when they had the money. And basically, the deal didn't happen. Taylor probably could have been an immediate millionaire. And we would have been able to reinvest that money into the next Taylor Twellman, or the next player. It doesn't have to be total replacement. But that's the business of soccer that we don't engage in. What ultimately happened is he was asked to stay. They ended up paying him $350,000, not 3.5 or $1 million, which who knows what he would have made over there. And at the end of the day, 3 games later, Danny Caleb kicks him in the face. He hits the post, and he has a concussion, and his career's over. That's a reason to be bitter, in my opinion, because that was a deal that really should have gotten. We should have made that thing happen. And ultimately, unfortunately for Taylor, he doesn't make the World Cup team, and he's the last guy cut. Now, the perception of reality might have outweighed reality if he would have gone, scored 6 or 7 goals over there, and all of a sudden his stock is up here. It's not, scored 15 goals in Major League Soccer. Everybody else has done that. But he's over in Europe scoring goals, and all of a sudden there's an added pressure. And also, the value of the player is one thing, but the level of the play and the pressure that Taylor would have been under would have probably changed the course of his career dramatically.
Yeah. I look at this landscape, and clubs in the USL, when fans are on social media going, "Hey, I just can't wait," even if it's even if I can't go to the stadium to watch the match, I'll watch it on TV. I just want them to get restarted as soon as it's safe to restart. But I don't think people really understand, because of the lack of that player, transfer economy, the lack of TV revenue, the lack of the commercial and sponsor revenue. USL, MLS, NWSL, all of these leagues, even into the amateur space, they rely heavily, pretty much in most cases, solely on match day revenue to, they're not necessarily turning a profit, but just an attempt to not, lose tons of money.
Sure. I mean, it's not a gushing wound. It's now we got a couple of Band-Aids on that thing, and it's just dripping blood off the side.
Right.
But it's not the answer. It shouldn't be. I mean, I think ideally USL, which I think is and Alec Papadakis has done a phenomenal job of building the business of that. And I think if you were to take the model and the way that it's built, it's an understandable model, but it's also hitting markets, unserviced markets that are actually proving to be hotspots in this country. And then there's this riding theme of, if you figure it out, if you're Louisville, if you're Nashville, if you're Minnesota or Seattle, Vancouver, Montreal, Portland, Sacramento, St. Louis, these are all teams that will now are aspiring to be a part of the bigger component of that. And then that's really, at the end of the day, is just a really big check to be a part of something. But if USL could increase its visibility through a television deal, the value of the players go up, because now, I mean, in the modern world, nobody cares where that player came from. They just want to know if they can do the job.
Right.
And I think people have vastly underestimated the level of play in the USL. At times, it's very, very good. There are some teams that struggle, and there's some teams that are solely developing talent. They got 15 and 16-year-olds out there, and it doesn't really matter if they win. And there's other teams that are win at all costs. But and the premise of maybe a Portland Timbers 2 or a Tacoma, those players are aspiring to play for the MLS team. If they go anywhere, it's going to go within the organization. So there are reserve teams and or academies within. Very seldom do you see a player go from a USL level, which has an affiliate, anywhere else but straight to the
first team.
The first team that's the umbrella company, if you will. So that's unfortunate, because I look at certain players, which is really. Let me give you a good example. There's a kid, Balu Akinyote, who played for Nashville last year, and he doesn't play for Nashville this year. He didn't make it to the MLS component of it, and Matt LaGrassa did. I think Matt deserves to be there, but Bolu Akinyote went to Birmingham, I believe. This kid, for me, in going back to where he came from, he was in New York and bounced around a little bit, and 6'3", I think 6'2", central midfielder. This is an asset. This is a player that if I took a job in the second division in Germany tomorrow, I would be on the phone with his agent saying, "Hey, how do we get him out of there? I need him." Because this is a kid that I see the talent in him. I see the ability. And just because he didn't fit the mold or he just didn't fit the plan, he doesn't end up playing in Major League Soccer, which is an absolute travesty. It's a big world out there. There's a lot of avenues, and I just think if we could be a little bit more open-minded, we would be, servicing our players better. The last thing I'd say to that is that, you go back to when the league contracted in 2001, Don Garber's first real move, which in my opinion, I was a casualty of that. I was fired essentially because I was old and we were going to reinvest in the kids. But there was also this overriding theme. We don't have enough talent for 10 teams. We were actually in that frame of mind, 19 years ago, where we didn't think we had enough talent for 10 teams. And now we have, because of some of the systematic change and some of the things that we've implemented, some of these things are good, and we can't bash everything because players are being developed. Are they being developed all the way to the extent of, is the trajectory hitting a certain part and stopping at times? Yeah, it is, but we have too much talent now. We have too much talent for the teams that we have, and that's a good thing. So the growth that we see is we refer to it as cancer at times. Cancer will grow any direction. It's not a tree. I mean, we don't have a pyramid. We have a tree. The tree just grows where it wants to grow and wherever the sun's coming from. But I do think that at some point, this country is going to wake up and realize the potential and the opportunity right in front of their face.
That was part one of our interview with Eric Wynalda. We're going to bring you the other part of that interview tomorrow, part 2. Big thanks to him for spending some time with us, talking about all those issues, and we will get into more of that, as I said, tomorrow. Our sponsor this half hour is Charity Water. If you want to know more about making an impact on the world and making a difference in the world, Charity Water is a great place to get started. Go to charitywater.org today to learn how your story can be part of their story in providing clean drinking water to people all over the world. Learn more at charitywater.org. We'll be right back after this.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water and a lack of toilets kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to bring clean drinking water right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything. Or you could know that you'd made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
Thanks for watching the show. That is it for today. As I said, we'll be back tomorrow with part 2 of our interview with Eric Wynalda. Thanks for watching. As always, you can watch at danielworkman.com/watch to find your options to watch the show, or you can listen to the podcast later on your favorite podcast platforms. That's all for today. We'll see you again tomorrow.